This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. I had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Monday, starting a brand new week of more of the same, unfortunately. But yes, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and so what are you going to do? Other than, of course, stay at home and wash your hands if possible. So there's that. Okay, so I have a little bit of a related story personally. And so, we'll talk about that before we dive into the show. But first, we have, of course, very stable genius tweeting some cringe. We'll talk about that. We've got Peter Navarro versus Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's a fascinating story. We've got also Trump's plans to give investors a massive tax cut. Yeah. We've got updates on the Wisconsin primary. I had a whole story planned out on that, but we actually do have some good news on that Wisconsin primary. And then we're going to talk Joe Rogan. And so I know some of you, I know don't like Joe Rogan. I know some of you actually might like Joe Rogan. I'm not entirely sure, but we're going to talk about that in his recent admission on his show and the reasons why. And so we'll do that. But before we get into it, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. Helps us out greatly, especially during this time of economic disaster, basically. All right. So, all right. So before we get into it, hopefully everybody had a good weekend. As usual, as we're supposed to, didn't do a whole lot, played some video games, did a little Greedfall, tried that out. But something that's, my wife had to work on Sunday, right? And so what happened to her, is that she works at an adult foster care home, right? She takes care of people with physical and mental disabilities. And she finds out that the day before, on Saturday, someone came in who had contact with someone who tested positive for coronavirus. And so, that's ridiculous. Why would you come into work if you've had contact with somebody who had coronavirus? And so this person obviously is putting their coworkers in danger because they were not doing the stay-at-home order. We found out that this person was going out and visiting their friends and playing cards. What are you doing? You're actually going out there and what? You're visiting your friends. You're hanging out in the middle of a pandemic. And again, Michigan has a stay-at-home order, right? What are you doing? What are you doing? How stupid are you? Are you trying to get your entire workplace affected? Again, remember, this person works around people who are immunocompromised. And so, with the patients, what are you doing? You're putting their lives in danger. So that person, of course, got, I wouldn't say they're not laid off or anything, but they got told, go to quarantine. You're not to come back to work for 2 weeks. You don't get any pay. Sad day for you. You're going to stay home because you were being an idiot. And that's exactly what it is. And unfortunately, like now we're all worried. So we're worried that this person had unknowingly exposed a lot of people to coronavirus. A lot of people could get sick. And then, of course, I'm worried about like, oh, did she get it from the coworker and bring it? I don't think so, because they've been doing a lot of sanitizing, and they're wearing face masks, and they're doing gloves and all that stuff. But seriously, though, like, don't do that. There's a stay-at-home order for a reason. Stay home, and you could protect other people. And so now, again, there's a lot of concern, and it kind of hits home more than normal. And so it sucks. Let's just say that. It's just another thing to worry about. But what are you going to do? Okay. Let's get on with the rest of the show. We'll start out with Donald Trump and his cringe. Boy, there's a lot of weirdos in the chat today. Like, what is going on here? Ridiculous. Okay. YouTube some days, man. A lot of people have a lot of extra time on their hands there. All right. So President Donald Trump kicked off what medical experts and his own Surgeon General have said would be the worst week yet of coronavirus deaths by posting Twitter cringe. So here's what he posted. Light at the end of the tunnel, in all caps. Light at the end of the tunnel, guys. Oh, thank God. I was worried. I was so concerned. But, the president tells us light at the end of the tunnels. So, oh, great. Even though this week is actually supposed to be the worst. And look, the problem with that, of course, is right now we don't have enough beds. We don't have enough PPE. We don't have enough ventilators, right? We have hospitals that are, at this point, having to choose who lives and who dies, who gets a ventilator and who doesn't, right? Based on things like age. So we have created, ironically, death panels. Oh, great. Lovely. So, and you want to say, of course, oh no, everything's going to be fine. Light at the end of the tunnel, right? No. See, there's a very long tunnel that we are in right now. Okay. We're not even halfway through it. Okay. We're a lot of places have not hit peak, infection yet. So look, that's a problem, right? But this moron of morons, this deeply unintelligent person, is damn near spiking the football while the stadium's on fire. No, it's trash, total trash. Trash administration, trash response. But here's the thing. Trump cares about two things. We know this. He cares about his reelection. He cares about his ego, right? And in order to get elected, he's got to show that he can get the markets back up and running. And so that's the thing. Light at the end of the tunnel. That means you guys can go back to work. Hey, people who are not working, will go back to work, get the economy running so that I can get my numbers back up. I can say that I'm a hero and that I'm amazing and awesome. And then you die. But I don't really care about you. You see, it's all about me. You missed the memo when it says only Donald Trump matters, right? And that is not advisable, obviously. Having people go out and die Totally unadvisable. All right, so now, as for his ego, he wants people to, of course, think that he's done such a great job with this pandemic that it proves everything that he says to himself in the mirror every morning, right? I'm the best. I'm the greatest. Nobody knows pandemic response like Donald Trump. Let me tell you, nobody. It's the wettest from the standpoint of water, right? But look, in reality, more people are dying and are going to die than they should because the administration, they sat on this for a long time. And that's the problem. They ignored warnings of the specific virus coming out. And not only that, they got rid of the pandemic response team. There's an entire book of notes, right? 69 pages of notes on pandemic response, right? On this specifically, that the Obama administration had written out. In 2017, they ignored it. The Trump administration said, oh, yeah, that's nice. We're not going to read that. Chuck it. Don't need it. You know what we need to do, actually, is give tax cuts to the rich. So, no, we cannot see the light because idiots have made this tunnel a lot longer than it needs to be, especially the governors that have, as of yet, refused to enact stay-at-home orders, which is why, and I'll leave you with the reality of the situation here, is spelled out by the Surgeon General.
I've talked to many of these governors, and here's what I say to them. Here's what I would say to them right now. The next week is going to be our Pearl Harbor moment. It's going to be our 9/11 moment. It's going to be the hardest moment for many Americans in their entire lives. And we really need to understand that if we want to flatten that curve and get through to the other side, everyone needs to do their part. 90% of Americans are doing their part, even in the states where they haven't had a shelter in place. But if you can't give us 30 days, governors, give us a week. Give us what you can so that we don't overwhelm our healthcare systems over this next week.
And there it is. All right. Well, let's move on here. With now millions of Americans out of work and many of them unable to get the one-time $1,200 coronavirus stimulus check, which will, of course, be eaten up by rent, the White House is laser focused on the group that needs help the most: the investors. Wait, really? The Washington Post, citing two anonymous officials familiar with the White House discussions, reported late on Sunday that the Trump administration is now weighing a payroll tax cut, a capital gains tax cut, and creating 50-year treasury bonds to lock in low interest rates, and a waiver that would clear businesses of liability from employees who contract coronavirus while on the job. Oh, they must be absolutely thrilled. Hey, employers that didn't prioritize your employee safety over your bottom line, causing many people to get sick. Well, don't worry. We got you. We'll take care of you. I mean, this is absolutely gross. Now, New York Magazine's Eric Levitt tweeted this in response to it. Won't somebody please think of the employers who want to coerce their employees into accepting life-threatening workplace conditions without facing legal liability? Yay. Awesome. So that's fantastic. But understand, this is the way, and it's the worst way, right? That Donald Trump and the Republicans are going to bring the country back to work. I mean, so you've heard them talk about this, right? We got to get the country back to work. The cure can't be worse than the disease. We've got to make sure to do everything so the economy doesn't crash. I know. Here's what we're going to do. We're just going to make people go back to work and then make companies not liable for people who get coronavirus and die. I mean, it's a perfect solution. We get our economy going. We get our numbers back up. Our corporations start to make money again. And, if people die, well, it's a sad day for them. Sad day for them. So that is, of course, evil. You were literally killing your workplace. I mean, what other word is there other than evil? Now, aside from that horrible provision, which, again, is the worst thing in this, the rest of it, of course, is wealth care. The rest of those ideas have been introduced before and, of course, benefit directly the wealthy. Okay. So now, last year, for example, Trump floated the idea of bypassing Congress to index capital gains to inflation. The Center on Budget Policy and Priorities estimated in a 2018 analysis that 86% of the benefits of indexing capital gains to inflation would, of course, go to the top 1%. The reaction, of course, to these ideas is about what you would expect. HuffPost senior reporter Zach Carter says a capital gains tax cut would be smash and grab economics with no value to the economic and medical calamity facing us. Yes, but it would help the billionaires. That would be great for them. Journalist John Walker called the Trump administration's reported proposals, quote, the worst possible set of ideas for dealing with a pandemic. Wait, are you saying giving giant corporate tax cuts or tax cuts to investors would be bad during a pandemic? Well, it certainly wouldn't help the situation. And of course, Walker wrote for the entire bill, or the entire set of proposals, we are beyond parity at this point, making it easier for people to get sick at work, rewarding people for going into work at this point, which doesn't make any sense, rewarding vulture capitalists profiting off a crisis. Yes, that is a parody, but welcome to American capitalism, right? So the sick thing here is that the Federal Reserve has been giving the banks about $1 trillion a day, right? Well, we got to make sure the banks don't fail. Now, big corporations also have been getting their money, right, through this $2 trillion stimulus bill, right? Small businesses, however, they've been having a very difficult time getting their small business assistance, that the part of that $2 trillion coronavirus relief bill. They actually have to go through a lot of hoops in order to get that. The same, of course, can be said about workers and the unemployed. For example, unemployment in Florida, I mean, it's a complete disaster. I talked about that, and it's not just Florida. It's in a lot of different places. In fact, the Washington Post reported on Sunday that the law's provision to boost unemployment benefits has become tangled in dated and overwhelming state bureaucracies as an unprecedented avalanche of jobless Americans seek aid. And the reason that I point at Florida specifically is because Republicans set that up to fail. And shockingly, or not shockingly, it has failed. I mean, you've got hundreds of thousands of people that are trying to navigate a system that was designed to deny them benefits and not work. But hey, let's look at more tax cuts, right? As for the $1,200 coronavirus checks, nobody knows when we're supposed to get those. I know the administration says, well, we're going to send them out on the 13th, and then we're going to send them out to people's, in waves to people's bank accounts. But if you don't have a bank account, then we're going to wait till May to start cutting checks. And those checks might not be here till September. And so that's a complete and utter disaster as well. One more thing, too, by the way. The other idea, as I mentioned, was a payroll tax cut, right? So we're doing a payroll tax cut. Well, that's a stealth tax cut, it's a stealth attack on Social Security. Not only that, but I mean, yes, if you're an essential worker and you're still actually lucky enough to be working, right? Well, that does help you, but doesn't help regular people. Doesn't help the people who've been laid off right now. And so, I mean, there's a whole lot of problems going on. It's full of terrible ideas. But what do you expect from President Trump and his rich friends? They're not interested in helping regular American workers survive this so that they can then later on go back to work. No, all they're worried about is their rich friends and their donors. Okay. So let's move on here. Trump administration officials are feuding with each other over a possible treatment to coronavirus. Now, this is according to a report in Axios. You had White House trade official Peter Navarro going up against Anthony Fauci. Now, Anthony Fauci is the nation's top infectious disease expert. And basically what they were fighting over is the malaria drug hydroxychloroquine, right? Or chloroquine. And so they're fighting over the efficacy of the drug and whether or not they should continue to, the administration, President Trump specifically, should promote it as a treatment or a cure for, or well, at least a treatment for coronavirus. So now Navarro accused Fauci of opposing the administration's ban on travel from China. This is during the fight after Fauci cautioned against the administration promoting the use of hydroxychloroquine to treat the coronavirus. So this is what Navarro said, quote, "You were the one who early on objected to the travel restrictions with China." Okay, but what does that have to do with anything else? What does that have to do with this? Especially since that's literally fake news, right? Because according to the report, many in the room were confused at that, since Fauci was one of the initial few to agree with Trump on the move. So, wait, Fauci was like, yeah, we should do a travel restriction from China. And Navarro's like, how come you did not support that travel restriction from China? That's why you're wrong about chloroquine. Wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. And look, I actually agree with the Trump administration's travel restriction on China. It makes sense in a global pandemic. It just does. And so, sure. And here you have a medical professional, Fauci, praising that during a press briefing on March 12th. So that's just factually incorrect. Now, that said, the entire argument here is about the use of hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus. So right now, we don't necessarily know if it's an effective treatment. Now, it could be. It could be proven by studies, sure. And in that case, we'll have at it. Go and promote the hell out of it, right? That's great. Let's use it. The problem is the science hasn't quite come in on it yet. And Fauci himself has said, look, it's not a proven fact that it's effective yet. Now, they are using it on patients in New York, right? And so far, the people that are administering it to patients in New York are saying, look, we still don't really know if this works. I mean, we've got some anecdotal evidence, but we really need more trials. We need to work with this for a while yet before we have a definitive answer. Trump says, no, it works greatly. I mean, here we go. This is on Sunday. He said, and this is Trump in a press briefing. He said, hydroxychloroquine is a great and powerful anti-malaria drugs, and there are signs that it works on this. Some very strong signs. It's very strong, right? Still anecdotal, right? And worthy of more study and investigation. Now, Trump also recommended combining that hydroxychloroquine with an antibiotic, right? So look, I'm no doctor, right? And neither is Peter Navarro, by the way, or Trump. But antibiotics treat bacterial infections. This is a viral infection. Doesn't that quite work or not work? I mean, but nonetheless, Trump says, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Well, there are other experts saying it's possible you could lose your life, especially if you accidentally confuse hydroxychloroquine with chloroquine, which is a fish tank cleaner. So there's a real problem with this, right? And look, the thing is, we don't know the effects. We haven't studied this. We don't know side effects. We don't know what's going to happen, right? Especially if people start combining drugs randomly based on what President Trump says. Medical professionals are saying there's no evidence yet that this works or that it prevents the transmission of COVID-19. And that's the other thing. Trump says, well, you could take this beforehand and you might not even get it. Now, think about this. What would that get people to do? Obviously, they would take it, right? And not need it, because there is also a need for lupus patients, for example, and other, autoimmune disorders. People would take that to manage those conditions, which are no longer available. You have people taking this now, and they think, well, I'm fine. I'm protected. Trump said it's going to prevent me from getting and spreading the disease. So now I'm just going to go out into the general public. Wait, you're going to go out into the general public, get it, because some people are asymptomatic, right? But can still spread the disease, and you've made it worse. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so I would say that right now, until we have the facts, I would just ignore the rantings of an orange lunatic. That said, Navarro is strictly with Donald Trump on this, and he thinks that he is more qualified than Dr. Fauci, and this is what he said on Face the Nation.
So why is Dr. Anthony Fauci, the lead infectious disease doctor in the country, wrong about this, in your opinion?
Sure. I let him speak for himself, John, but I would have two words for you: second opinion. And in terms of the studies that exist, I think you would grant me that there are numerous studies on this which show preliminary therapeutics.
I know three. Hang on, Peter.
John,
Peter,
hang on.
I have to ask a question. I let you go to 4 points at the beginning. I just want to follow. You're saying a second opinion here. What are your qualifications to weigh in on medicine more than Dr. Anthony Fauci? Why should we listen to you and not Dr. Fauci?
Well, let me suggest, John, that later in the day you have William Grace on, another famous doctor in the city of New York. He can talk eloquently about this. But John, doctors disagree about things all the time. My qualifications in terms of looking at the science is that I'm a social scientist. I have a PhD, and I understand how to read statistical studies, whether it's in medicine, the law, economics, or whatever.
I'm sorry, that doesn't qualify you to treat patients. You know it doesn't qualify you to treat patients.
John. All I'm asking for you.
John. What was that? That's literally how they treat the media. No, those were tough questions. It was actually fair, because he's literally saying, okay, well, you're saying this. Dr. Fauci says that. What are your qualifications? You're obviously not a doctor. Well, I'm a social scientist. So, social scientist over infectious disease expert. I know more than he does, because I've read the studies for what you mean from actual scientists. Look, again, there is some anecdotal evidence that this could be effective, but you have to do more study. You actually have to do a long-term. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people are, obviously you're in a rush, right? Because people are dying, and this is disastrous, this economic shutdown and all that. But unfortunately, science don't care about your timetable, right? You have to do significant study from this and significant testing in order to figure out if there is an efficacy for this. And so for this drug and this drug combination. And unfortunately, we don't have that data. But nonetheless, right, he's saying, well, I know more than he does, because I think he's wrong politically. Stupid. Having a PhD, by the way, in social science does not make you a doctor. Having a doctorate doesn't necessarily make you a doctor. Look, for example, Dr. Jill Biden, right? She's Joe Biden's wife, right? She has a doctorate, right? Dr. Joe Biden. Well, obviously, she must be a smart medical doctor. No, she's not. She's actually got a doctorate in education. She's not a medical professional. And the reason I bring that up is because Whoopi Goldberg, right? Whoopi Goldberg said, oh, she would just make a fantastic Surgeon General. No, she wouldn't. She's, again, has a doctorate in education. But I use that example, by the way, to point out that there's ignorance on both sides involving this. No, listen to the doctors, man. Just listen to it, right? And look, Peter Navarro can read statistical studies. I can read statistical studies. It doesn't mean I'm more qualified than Peter Navarro, right? It definitely doesn't mean that I'm more qualified than Anthony Fauci, because we're not experts on infectious disease. So I'm sorry, I'm going to defer to the actual experts here, and more importantly, the evidence so far. And right now, again, there's not enough evidence to show that there is effectiveness of this treatment in coronavirus. So now one more thing here, which is just fun. Apparently the situation had came to a head, right? It got a little heated. Now, an official who spoke to Axios said the incident involving Fauci and Navarro, this was behind closed doors, was very unusual. Quote, there's never been a confrontation in the task force meetings like the one yesterday. The source familiar with Fauci and Navarro's dispute told Axios. People speak up and there's robust debate, but there's never been a confrontation. Yesterday was the first confrontation. My guess is that Fauci had enough, right? Again, there's only so much that you can take when you're the one who is arguing caution, right? And arguing the facts, and you have people around you that are idiots, that are clowns, right? And so at some point, you're going to snap and go, no, God damn it. No, you were being stupid. That is not what the science says. This is what the science says. And it's just, right now, it's not an effective treatment, and we need more study. Get that through your skull. But Trump is the most clownish of the clowns, right? Peter Navarro was clown, right? And a lot of them are, around Trump are clowns, right? But Trump is the clownish of the clowns because he goes out and says, "Oh, it's absolutely fine. In fact, it's fantastic. It's great. It'll protect you." No, complete and utter lies, pseudoscience, completely wrong. But while Trump is the clown of clowns, don't forget that around him, he's got this. He's surrounded by little clown cars filled with people like Peter Navarro. Okay. All right. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We've got more stories here. We have Wisconsin. What is going on in Wisconsin? It is an absolute mess, but there is some good news. So we'll do that, and then we'll talk about Joe Rogan and that whole unfortunate thing. So I'm pretty sure I'll have people mad at me from every single side, but that's no different than every single day. So stay right here, like and share the stream, and we'll be back with my very controversial opinions around the nation.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so first I want to thank some channel members here. So let's go to channel members and thank Baby Faye and Jasper DeSung. So thank you. You can become a channel member by hitting the join button below and help independent progressive media. Very helpful during this difficult time. If you can become a member, please do. Also, same thing, Patreon. So what we want to do is we're at 365 patrons over on patreon.com/TWTNation. You can put in any amount. So you can be like a $1 supporter, you can be a $2 supporter, $3, whatever. And you can help support the show. We're at 365. We'd like to get to 400 by the end of the month. So we'd love to get 400 supporters. It's patreon.com/TYTNation. That's what helps keep the show alive. All right. That said, let's go and thank a couple of patrons here once I get to the correct thing. All right. So I want to thank Judith Ferraris and go down here and Bonnie Hell. So thank you. Patreon.com/TYTNation. All right. I don't think we have any super chats either. Super chats are another way to help the show too. Okay. Just reading some of the comments here. And by the way, there are people that are like a lot of trolls out because they don't have anything to do today. Like I guess a lot of them work and then don't have anything to do now. So they're trolling the channel, which is always funny to see. So there was a one comment here I wanted to address, but I'm not really sure if I can find it here. But there's something about not blaming Donald Trump for the people that took the chloroquine, and actually it was a couple that took it. It was the fish tank cleaner, and one of them died, and the other one said plainly, "We listened to Donald Trump." So there's a couple of other hosts who I do have a lot of respect for and personally like that don't want to blame Trump for that. I think they're wrong. Simple as that. We can have a disagreement on that. But I think it's perfectly fine to blame Trump when he comes out there and says, "Don't worry, take this, it's completely safe." No, don't listen to reality show clown. No, listen to your doctor. If your doctor says, "Hey, this is what you can take. This is what it is. And yes, in this dosage, it is safe." Well, then, okay, you can listen to them, right? Because they would know a little bit better than Donald Trump saying, "Oh, take this, it's safe." When, again, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, they're two different things. One's a fish tank cleaner. You should, look, you would think that people would be smart enough not to take fish tank cleaner. But then again, I mean, you have people saying, well, I mean, it sounds like the same thing, so it must be safe. The president said so. No, that is on him. You've really got to be careful when you're in the public sphere about the things that you say, because people do take you seriously. And that's also why, by the way, like, why people should always fact check, right? And not just fact check for themselves, fact check us, right? I don't mind somebody coming and saying, actually, here's, you said something on this show, and I looked it up from a reputable source, and it turns out that you were wrong about that. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. Please fact check us. Make sure that we're doing things right, because the whole purpose of the show is not to mislead people, but to give a perspective. And sometimes when you give a perspective, sometimes you'll get some of the facts wrong. And that's when, and when you say, hey, that was wrong. Okay. Doesn't change the perspective, but it helps to be accurate. And so I want to be accurate. And I want to make sure that, I'm giving you the correct thing, but it can't be correct 100% of the time. And that's unfortunate. I mean, again, it's just me. I don't have like an entire team of fact checkers behind me, like someone like CNN. So they could do a much better job, by the way, but they choose not to. But I do the best that I can. And so, anyway, I disagree with Kyle. I disagree with anybody who says that no, it's not really Trump's fault. No, he should really watch what he says because he has a gigantic platform. All right. Anyway, I think I'm clear on that. So let's move on. All right. So you have some breaking news out of Wisconsin regarding the Democratic primary. It appears that Wisconsin Governor Tony Everts has postponed the election until June 9th. So that's actually a very positive development. And of course, he did so because of concerns about the coronavirus, specifically in the fact that they did not have the right kind of infrastructure to do all mail voting. So that's very important. So now let me read you an article from The Hill. Everts, just minutes after Everts issued the order, Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald and Assembly Speaker Robin Vos issued a joint statement indicating they will challenge the directive in Wisconsin State Supreme Court. So these are the Republicans who were against this. So understand that Everts, Democrat, and the Democratic Party in Wisconsin said, okay, we should postpone this, right? We should make sure that we get as many voters as we can out there, but only when it's safe, right? And unfortunately, right now, it's not safe. And we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the poll workers. We don't have, the polling stations set up. In fact, in Milwaukee, there's normally about 180 polling stations. They shut down to about 5. Ridiculousness. So that's obviously not enough. Milwaukee has a population of about 600,000 people. And so all those people, I mean, obviously not all those people, but a majority of those people crammed into 5 polling stations in the middle of a pandemic, it's not going to cut it. So it's a good decision by Tony Everts. So now there's a lot of drama leading up to this. Again, you have Republicans that are saying, no, let's keep the election. Let's go. Let's have the election happen. And if people get sick, they get sick. If they die, they die. Right? I mean, yes, they didn't say that specifically, but that's the general intent. Like, let's continue to have this election, right? Let's do this. And again, I don't care what happens to regular people. And so not only that, but there were court challenges to this, to holding this primary, all that stuff. So I'm glad he used the power of the executive order. But again, we're going to see a challenge. But the primary was supposed to be tomorrow. You have a court challenge. That's going to take a while. That actually also was very helpful because with this, you end up having to delay this, unless, of course, there's a stay. But we'll see what happens, right? So now, look, there were a lot of reasons why they should deny they should not hold this primary tomorrow, right? And so part of the original story that I was going to talk about is where basically the Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, and mayors throughout the state, civil rights groups, were saying we should absolutely delay this election because you would have a problem with in-person voting. Having an election in the middle of a pandemic is ridiculous. Now, Republicans, again, were calling for this, but also Joe Biden. In fact, Biden had joined Republicans in urging the state to move ahead with the election as planned, saying that It's a matter for the Wisconsin courts and folks to decide. But wait a minute, Joe, if you were any kind of a leader, you would say, actually, no, I agree with my friend Bernie Sanders. We should postpone this until it's actually safe for people to go out. No leadership on the part of Joe Biden. I mean, he's literally calling for supporters to go out and get sick, and not, calling for the postponing of this election. Look, I guess Joe Biden joined Republicans because he kind of is one. But here's the thing. Here's the political part of this, right? And I know I can't believe you're politicizing the pandemic. No. Here's the thing. It was politicized long before by anybody who, people in the DNC and anybody who wants to basically stop the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. People will die, right, if this happens. And thankfully, it's not going to. But calling that out, if you call that out, you're a Bernie bro, right? Thing is, it was the experts that were calling for this. James Conway, an infectious disease expert at the University of Wisconsin, said the state's plan to go ahead with the in-person voting was really irresponsible. It just seems really irresponsible to make this one giant exception to social distancing. Conway told the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, from a public health stand, it's both the wrong message and it's taking an enormous gamble, and also would have been a complete mess, as I mentioned before. All the poll workers, they had a massive shortage of that. And they had, of course, only 5 polling stations in Milwaukee instead of 180. And so along with this massive issue of spreading around this disease, you also disenfranchise people. It's in a way, it's a form of voter suppression. Now, the Republicans, of course, the reason I'm not really complaining about them too much is because we already know where Republicans stand. The less people that show up, the more they tend to win elections. So they don't care about people. They don't care about their voters. And so they're basically disposable, throwaway. Hey, as long as I remain in power, that's all I care about. And when less people show up, I happen to win. But for Biden, I don't understand why Biden wouldn't become a leader on this. Why? You just want to avoid, you just wanted to avoid being a leader on this issue. Is it because you think that Bernie Sanders would have an advantage? Maybe he was afraid that Bernie Sanders would have an advantage. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and all of his policy positions seems to have been proven to be the right thing to do. And maybe he's afraid that people would wake up to it and think, oh, I did lose my employer-sponsored healthcare. Medicare for all sounds pretty good right now. Even so, you look at the polls in Wisconsin, they were not headed towards Bernie Sanders. And in fact, voting right now would do more to put Bernie Sanders to bed. And maybe that's why the DNC and Biden himself were pushing forward with this. And now the other thing is Bernie Sanders was getting blamed for people for this, people turning out to vote. Thankfully, they don't have to until June 9th now. But if they had gone along with this and people had gotten sick, they would have, of course, blamed Bernie Sanders for not dropping out. And so, again, there are layers of political just ridiculousness in this. And so, what do you expect, right? You got to wonder, if you're Joe Biden, why put your voters so much at risk in order to make a quick end to Bernie Sanders? I don't know. I tell you, though, if this had gone forward, I would have called this an illegitimate election, because that's what it would have been. Even if Bernie had won, illegitimate election. Don't. Any primary held in the middle of a pandemic where 100% of ballots are not counted, illegitimate. Clearly. The utter callousness of Republicans and the DNC and Joe Biden for trying to encourage in-person voting is gross. Not at all representative democracy. And so it would have absolutely 100% have been illegitimate. And thankfully, Evers did the right thing and put a stop to it. Okay.
Well, this is the real issue with the Democratic Party. They've essentially made us all morons.
Yeah.
With this Joe Biden thing, they really have. They
you
made us all
imagine?
morons.
Who do we need? I mean,
I can't vote for that guy.
I can't vote for him.
I can't vote for him.
I can't vote for Trump.
I'd rather vote for Trump than him. I don't think he could handle anything. I mean, you're relying entirely on his cabinet. Like, if you want to talk about an individual leader that can communicate, he can't do that. And we don't even know what he's going to be like after a year in office. The pressure of being the president of the United States is something that no one has ever prepared for.
All right, so that was Joe Rogan basically admitting, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump. I can't vote for Joe Biden. So this was during a conversation with Eric Weinstein, right? He's basically managing director of Theo Capital, right? So look, they had this conversation, and Rogan's getting attacked a lot for this. Understandably so, right? Now, Bernie Sanders is also being attacked for this because Rogan had basically endorsed Bernie Sanders, said, I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders if he's the Democratic nominee against Donald Trump. So now a lot of resistance people are like, aha, see, look at that. Bernie bros rather have Trump. Well, but here's the thing, right? And a lot of establishment liberals miss this. Joe Rogan is not a member of the Democratic Party. He's not a member of any party, right? He's what we call the apolitical center. These are people that are not partisans. They trend towards people, not parties, right? And so, unfortunately, that seems to be a large chunk of the American electorate. I mean, you can even look back to Super Tuesday, right? Where a lot of people were paying attention. At the very, very last minute, there was a gigantic flood of media attention towards Joe Biden when Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and all them dropped out and endorsed him. And they're like, I don't know. I guess Joe Biden, I know who he is. I don't know who this other guy is. Okay, well, that's a good example of apolitical center, even though these are more Democratic voters, right? But Joe Rogan kind of represents what we're going to see a lot in the general election. And so, look, if you want to disagree with him on voting for Trump, that's perfectly fair, right? You want to call him privileged? Perfectly fair. I think he does have an amount of privilege, right? And you can certainly say that he's wrong. Thing about that is, Joe Rogan don't care. He does not give a crap. And so the important thing is you can't, a general election is a lot more different than a primary, right? So in the Democratic primary, we see right now a lot of vote shaming. Oh, how dare you vote for Bernie Sanders when you got to vote for Joe Biden? And then are you going to vote for Biden if he becomes the nominee? Are you going to vote for him? Well, people like Joe Rogan will look at that and say, yeah, I guess I'll vote for Trump. I mean, I don't really care. I'm not part of your party. I'm just a general election voter who sometimes votes, sometimes doesn't really care. But if I see somebody that I like, that I think can do a good job, then yeah, I'll turn out and vote for him. Okay. And again, that makes sense. See, you can't vote shame those people into not voting for Trump. In fact, that's going to drive them into the arms of Donald Trump even more. So understand this, right? And the point that I'm coming around to is that people like Rogan, like him or not, and the people who follow him and that are apolitical like him, they could have actually been part of a coalition of general election voters that would have voted for Bernie Sanders. Instead, now they're basically driven into the arms of Donald Trump or like Mr. Weinstein there, not voting for anyone at all. I mean, again, that's the two options. They either default to not voting. Maybe some of them will vote for Joe, but they'll either not vote, most likely, or vote for Donald Trump. And that's the reality. Donald Trump right now is the status quo. And so what was special about Bernie Sanders is that he did have the ability to reach people who are apolitical in the general election, not so much in a primary. And so I always get amused when, I get attacked by centrists online, for example. I get attacked by centrists in my Twitter account. They're like, well, Bernie Sanders couldn't beat Joe Biden in a primary. That means he couldn't win a general. No, that's completely wrong. That's two different voter bases, right? You have a Democratic primary that is generally filled with more hardcore party voters, people who are more engaged and plugged in. Okay, great. That is a different group of voters. And look, that's why people, of course, like Bernie, lose primaries, but actually do stand a better chance in general elections. Two different electorates, two different groups of people. And so it with two different priorities and two different, obviously, bases of knowledge, right? And so the people didn't reject Bernie. I hear that all the time. Oh, people rejected Bernie. No, the Democratic Party rejected Bernie, not the people. That's a big distinction. And now, very likely with Joe Biden, as we're seeing, this could have a reverse issue where Democrats choose Joe Biden, right, as they have, whereas the general election, the people reject him for whatever reason, right? Like a lot of people in the Rust Belt rejected Hillary Clinton. We saw that play out back in 2016. And so it would be nice if the Democrats had a good candidate and a good election strategy, but they don't. Joe Biden's message is literally, let's go back to Obama. Oh, fantastic. Great. Now, look, comparatively, Obama was vastly better than Donald Trump, obviously, but we still have the major issues that are plaguing people today. Stagnant wages, unaffordable housing, personal debt, student loan debt, medical debt, etc. No, look, Donald Trump hasn't done a goddamn thing about that, right? But again, people in the apolitical center, they're only paying attention really to their own lives. And so if they're comfortable now, well, then why would they change, right? Even if they think, well, look, somebody like Bernie Sanders could do a lot better for people. I'm still comfortable now, and voting for Joe Biden is not going to really have that much change. So why bother? What's the point, right? And so all of those different factors, by the way, created somebody like Donald Trump. If we don't actually solve those issues, and we're going to end up with just another Trump and probably a more competent one. And so that's a problem, right? But none of that, again, matters to people like Joe Rogan, who are not political. Now, look, I disagree with him on voting for Joe Biden. Voting for Trump. I couldn't vote for Donald Trump. I think it's a terrible idea. That said, I'm really having a very difficult time imagining myself voting for Joe Biden, and I'm being honest with you about that. I have almost no reason to vote for Joe Biden other than, of course, get Donald Trump out of office. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen anyway. So a lot of people, I think, are feeling like, well, if I go and vote for Biden, it's going to be a wasted vote anyway. And then, of course, there's the issues with the alleged sexual assault, with Joe Biden having a history, Lucy Flores, and of course the newest sexual assault allegation against him by Tara Reid. And so that presents another big issue, right? And that also presents a big issue when you vote down ticket as well, because if you're not showing up to the polls, you're not exactly voting for Democrats down ticket either. And so that's an issue, right? But to Rogan and his listeners, all Joe is again, more status quo. And they already had the status quo with Trump, so apparently it's not all that bad, right? Or different than life under Obama. But of course, here's where it goes to the privilege, right? And maybe Rogan realizes this, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to him. Maybe he does. But Muslims, kids in cages, immigrants, poor people, their life isn't so great under Donald Trump either. But again, it's not really Joe's experience. And that privilege, of course, definitely informs his point of view. And I say that, I don't mean that as an attack. I'm saying it's a statement of fact, right? That if you have some privilege, you have that point of view. And you have to get other people around you to point that out and be like, hey, you realize like there are other people other than you, right? But that's the thing. People who are apolitical obviously are not as informed as we are. So again, you look at Donald Trump and think, well, he's fine, I guess, whatever. Whereas Biden, it's very obvious that Biden is having a very difficult time. I mean, you look at all the flubs, you look at the gaps, you look at the times where Biden can't seem to get it together in the interviews, and you think, is this guy going to be able to lead the country? Again, Trump's a disaster. He doesn't know what he's talking about half the time. And the other half, he's just gibberish, right? But you look at Biden, and he really seems to be struggling. I don't know if he has dementia. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But Rogan has a point. Trump is going to eat him alive in the debate stage. I mean, look, you've got one guy who's a pathological liar. You've got another guy who's also a pathological liar, but happens to be not as sharp as he was before and seems to struggle sometimes. Now, look, to be fair, you go back in that debate between him and Bernie Sanders, and he was on point. He was sharper. But then you look at all the successive interviews, and now you look at the fact that Joe Biden is sitting in with him to help him out. You think, I don't know, man. Okay. If you think that Donald Trump's not going to use any of that stuff against him, by the way, and it's only because Bernie bros are taking these videos and spreading them around that, that Donald Trump wouldn't do that himself. You're deeply mistaken. Of course he will. He's going to do all that stuff. Already he has. And that could convince a lot of non-voters that Biden's a disaster and that the only choice we have is Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's not much of a leader either. Never has been. And I wouldn't vote for him for a million years. But these non-political people who will either stay home or vote for Trump, well, those are the people we need to reach. And unfortunately, with Joe Biden, you can't reach those people. Bernie Sanders right now was the only candidate who was able to reach outside of the Democratic Party because he never really was part of the Democratic Party and reach people who, would have went for Trump. You don't see anybody else or didn't see anybody else, I guess, other than Tulsi Gabbard that could have reached outside of the Democratic Party to get apolitical people. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Doesn't look like Bernie Sanders is going to happen. And I don't say that definitively, of course, because anything can happen. But, I mean, this looks to be a bad general election. Very bad. Because you have very enthusiastic people on Trump's side and a very big enthusiasm gap on Biden's side, and a whole lot of people who were Bernie Trump voters or apolitical voters or people who joined the Democratic Party only to support Bernie Sanders saying, I'm not interested. F around and find out. Well, I'm afraid that we're all going to find out. All right. All right. So, by the way, before I wrap up the show, Weary Pirate says, I don't know why people keep saying Biden did good in that debate. He was a disaster. He couldn't stop lying. Corporate media wouldn't call him out on it. Okay, so, no, the reason that we're saying that he did good in that debate is that basically he appeared coherent. Yeah, of course he lied. We know that. Of course he lied. Of course corporate media wouldn't call that out. What we mean by good is basically he didn't crap himself on stage. Like, that's good. That's good for Biden right now, okay? That's good for Donald Trump. And so that, again, good is a relative thing, but you got to understand that's a very, very, very low bar that we're judging when we say he did good. So there it is. All right. Man, it's been an hour already. All right. Low expectations for Biden, indeed. All right, guys and gals. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very helpful if you do. It helps support the show. Obviously, it gets more viewers attracted, so that's great. Also consider becoming a patron. Support us at patreon.com/TWTNation or channel members by hitting the join button below. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you later.
Please clap.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Tolerate.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.